In this chapter, I'm going to show you how you can integrate writing across the curriculum. And we know from research that when you're looking at reading, writing, listening, speaking, and thinking at high levels, that needs to be done throughout the instructional day. As a matter of fact, in the Common Core State Standards, the entire goal of language arts is for students to read, write, listen, speak, and think critically as they are learning in all their content areas. Hence, we need to read and write, listen, speak, and think in language arts, in science, social studies, mathematics, as well as having a writing block standing on its own. This is critical, but how do we do it? So in this chapter, I'm going to show you the components of writing. I'm going to talk about many different activities, which we will address, and I will walk you through in this book. So let's first just identify all of these different activities and skills, put them where they would belong in your instructional day, show you how I'm going to integrate, and then we'll begin our different chapters so you can learn all of these different methods to have your students reach the standards. We're going to look at language arts, science social studies, your writing block, and then I also have out spelling and grammar time, as well as teacher write and editing. These are different components in your day that I'm going to show how you can integrate your writing. Let's integrate writing in your core subjects. First, let's look at your language arts time. This language arts time, where I'm going to show you how you can integrate your writing, is during your focus story. And your focus story is either a short story or short informational text, or it could be a novel. It's any type of text that you are focusing on for about 7 to 10 days. Typically, 5 days are used for one story or informational piece. The problem with that is that we're rushing through those days and many times trying to teach the story instead of using the story as a tool to teach your standards. So I suggest that you have 7 to 10 days for this focus story. Let me show you how you can have 7 to 10 days for your focus story, but also realizing that that may not be enough text, at-grade level text that your students are utilizing throughout the year. The focus text will be used so that they can learn how to comprehend text as well as to connect writing to. But in addition to that, they need more text, at-grade level text, that they are going to utilize in order to apply all these skills that you're teaching. That's why I like to have the read aloud. And when I say a read aloud, what I really mean by that is a cold read. And a cold read is a daily 15-minute time period that you will read to your students text so that they can take what they've learned in the focus text to apply to the cold read. So if you've been teaching a certain strategy, then you can have your students apply that strategy to the cold read. Remember, only 15 minutes, whether it's a novel, a short piece of text that you're using, whatever it may be, it is text that they have not had access to. It's the first time they've ever listened to it, so they can apply these strategies. Since you have 7 to 10 days that you're using a story in order to connect writing, teacher comprehension skills, and you'll see also so that we can address vocabulary, I have shown you the read aloud is important in order to have more cold text coming at the students so they can apply these learned skills. During these 7 to 10 days, I need to show you what activities we will use in order to teach writing in these core subjects. In language arts, during our focus text time, we will have our before reading, during reading, and after reading activities. Before reading activities is going to focus primarily on vocabulary as well as language development and narrative writing. The activity that I'm going to show you in this book that will address all three of those areas is going to be something called movie scripts. There are other activities I use to introduce the new vocabulary, but that's something that you'll have to go to my reading manual for. In this case, I'm just showing you components of writing that you would integrate into your day. This activity, movie scripts, what it will do is it will take vocabulary that you have taught for this current story and for previous stories. So students are constantly using this vocabulary and learning how to integrate it into their own writing. That's important. Why teach vocabulary just for the focus story and then it disappears? We want to teach vocabulary to mastery, how to use that mastered vocabulary in order to pull it into their own writing. So in my activity here, movie scripts, students will learn how to take their mastered vocabulary, how to integrate it into a movie script, which will actually end up becoming narrative writing, and it will become a language development activity because they will learn how to write and develop sophisticated sentences. And of course, it will be a vocabulary activity because they'll be using this week's vocabulary or past vocabulary to integrate into these new stories. In order to master vocabulary, what's very key is that we cannot just teach the words so that they understand them when they read them in the story. They also, for mastery, need to use those words in flowing text. They need to use it in their language, so flowing language, not in isolation, and in different contexts. So if I teach vocabulary and they only see it in the focus story of the week, that's where they understand that vocabulary word only in that context. But if you are using these vocabulary words in different contexts, then they become flexible with the word and they will master it. And then they will learn how to use that word in their writing in different pieces of writing that they will have throughout the year, as well as they'll come upon those words in other reading and identify it and understand what those words mean. So vocabulary mastery is for students not only to understand a word and use it in flowing language, whether they're speaking or writing, but also to use it in many different contexts. The bonus about this movie script activity is it is going to be what I call an introductory activity. And what that means is you will, for about the first 4 weeks of school, teach students this activity. And then it will become an independent assignment that you will give students every Monday. So now you have independent work. If you don't need independent work, this can become a homework assignment. So it's a beautiful activity for your students, not only to develop these skills and continue developing and practicing them throughout the year, but it also now will become a meaningful independent work activity or a homework activity, so your students will keep developing their narrative writing skills, their sentence skills, language skills, as well as vocabulary skills. During Reading Language Arts, we're not addressing that because this book is primarily for the writing. I just want to show you that once we have our before reading activities, then you would go to teaching children how to read the text using text structure and reading strategies. Now, if you want more information for that, then you'll need to use my reading book. The after reading activities. So after children have read this focus story, you will have many days because your before reading activities will take about 1 day. Your during reading activities will take anywhere between 2 to 3 days. For the after reading activities, you could have anywhere from 6 to 7 days to focus on writing connected to your language arts story. That's why I'm going to list out different activities that I will address in this book so that your students can connect their writing to their reading. First of all, after reading the story or the information, students will write a summary. Summary writing is critical for students because it will help with comprehension as well as improve their own writing. The second activity is called a Come Alive box. And a Come Alive box is actually an activity students will do so they will learn how to write better descriptions and introductions to their narratives. So that if they learn how to write a Come Alive box connected to language arts, when they're writing narratives, they'll have that skill down. Another activity that students will do is opinion writing. With opinion writing, whether it's a narrative or information, they will have an opinion about that topic or that story. So we'll connect opinion writing also to this story. Notice we're having our informative explanatory writing with summary writing, we're working on our narrative with the Come Alive as well as the movie script, and we're having opinion writing. The last thing I want to show you is your focus skill. Many times you will have a focus skill like compare, contrast, cause, effect, fact, and opinion. So you also want to have that connection to writing, which we'll address in this book as well. In language arts, we had before, during, and after because we had a specific text that we were utilizing. In science and social studies, on the other hand, we usually have a unit of study. So that means we're either going to be working on a unit in science or a unit in social studies. And in order to do that, you have to basically look at your students are either, as you begin a unit of study, in the unknown, and then as you progress through the units of study, they will be in the known. And what that mainly means is, as I work with students, let's say we're learning about plants, I have to ask myself, I'm looking at my science standards, do my students have background about plants? Do they have this information? Is this known, or are they in the unknown? And if they are in the unknown, then I have to give them the background for that. And we also have to go to text and read about the information as well. So what happens with your science and social studies time is we want to integrate in this time period writing. We want them to write information or opinions about this information that they've been learning. Well, the problem with that is it takes quite a while for them to know the information and master it enough so they can write about it, because you can't write information unless you know about it. So that's why I've developed different activities in which you can front load information, so you are the giver of the information. That's called lecture notes. And lecture notes is actually going to have two different parts that you are going to address when it comes to this activity. One, you are going to give them background, front load students so they have background in whatever you are studying in science and social studies, as well as teaching them how to write information. So lecture notes is actually going to end up becoming a background and writing activity. Your students now will not only have background, but they will produce pieces of writing after you finish with your lecture notes activity. One other additional activity are content diagrams. Content diagrams are used when we need to address topical vocabulary. And those are words that are specific to the content, like molecule, leaf, stem, photosynthesis. And what we'll do is not only will we front load that vocabulary, but we'll put it in a format so that it ends up becoming descriptive writing with those topical words embedded in the description. So for front loading information, we have lecture notes and content diagrams. Now your students will get background and they will end up learning how to write and have pieces of writing during your social studies or science time. In addition, when students are in the unknown, not only will we give background, but we will also be reading the textbook. When you read a textbook, what you'll end up doing is show children how to read a textbook, but then from there you'll take notes, and from the notes, you're going to write a summary of those notes. Now let's jump to the last box, and this is when students are in the known. Once we are in a unit of study, they know the information, they're mastering it and understand it, then you're actually going to take them through writing, and at this level, the students are going to brainstorm the information. You are no longer the giver of the information. So you will have brainstorm, and then you will have students go through the entire writing process. And they will use your direct instruction lessons in order to plan and write that information. At this point, your entire class may be writing at the whole group level because they're still learning the steps of how to write information. As students master the how of writing, then you're going to progress them along to table groups. So now you're slowly going to release responsibility and you're going to have children in table groups. That's mixed ability. So you are still helping them through the steps of how to write information, but in mixed ability groups, each table group is going to be writing their own papers so that they can practice helping each other walk through the steps to write the information. From those table groups, you will start assigning partners. So you may be writing several different papers at the table group level. And then you notice that there are some higher level students who understand the steps, and now you can release them from the table group and have them go to partner writing. That's when you have likability. So no longer mixed. In partners, you are going to have students who are at the same level working together, walking through the steps in order to write their information. It's critical that you understand if you are in this classroom lesson, you may have some students that are still in table group, mixed ability, where you're giving more support, and some students who are in partners, they know how to plan their writing, and together they're helping each other. And finally, you may have some students who you will release to independently write on their own. So at this think and write level, you may start at the beginning of the year where everyone in the entire class is brainstorming together and writing and walking through lesson steps to write information. Then you may be separating your class into table groups, mixed ability, so that you're slowly releasing responsibility, but they still have mixed ability. They can help each other through the steps with you aiding different groups along the way. From those mixed ability tables, you're going to start polling students and putting them into partners so that they, together as partners that are like ability, will walk through the steps to write. But at the same time, you may still have table groups with the other students who can't go to partners yet. You still need to give them support as they walk through the process. Ultimately, every student in your class will be working in either partner level or independently on their own. And that's the goal that you're trying to reach when you are writing about information connected to your science and social studies. Finally, we're going to look at the writing block. I assign narrative writing to the writing block. This is the reason why. Because I know I have so many different types of writing connected to my language arts, as well as during my science or social studies time. But the problem is, notice in my language arts, I have about 30 or 40 minutes, or 40 to 45 minutes in my science and social studies time. If I have narrative writing in my writing block, then all year long, I'm going to address that genre. But if I notice, today I'm working on the summary and I need more time than my 30 to 40 minutes for my summary writing, then I won't do narrative writing. I will use my writing block to extend my language arts time. So instead of looking at my schedule where I have these different parts of the day and they can't shift or change, I'm not going to do that. This is going to be a schedule where I have a writing block in which I teach narrative, or I am going to extend my language arts or science or social studies time for writing if I need more time for one of these activities. It's a fabulous way to give yourself more time and also for you to work on the narrative throughout the year if you don't need more time during language arts or science. In your writing block, you'll notice we need to teach students using specific direct instruction steps how to write. And that means that we need to have whole group writing lessons where we're all going to walk through these lessons, these direct instructions, systematic steps in order to write. And we're going to do that whole group. So that means that the students need to focus on the steps. So we will end up with similar stories or whatever genre we may be focusing on, but many times narratives in this case. and we will end up with the same story. So at the whole group level, what are we focusing on? The steps. Together, the entire class is walking through steps in order to plan their paper. What will happen? We will end up with a similar type of paper because our teaching focus is on the steps. As students master these steps, you are going to release them to partner level. Now let me also show you how this may look. You may have, at this point, table groups, which are mixed ability, and then partners, which are like ability. This is because you want to slowly release responsibility to every student in the classroom. And at first, you teach whole group. You may now, after a couple of writing lessons teaching narrative writing, you may say, my kids are getting pretty good at this. I think I'm going to switch them in table groups, mixed ability. So here you have your table groups. And you may have anywhere from 6 to 7 table groups, let's say. So now I have mixed ability of table groups. And we're walking again through the steps, and all these different table groups are writing their own stories, and they're helping each other through the process. After doing this several times, you'll start to notice that there are some real high kids in each one of these groups who you're going to release to partners. So here's your partner A, partner B, partner A, partner B. Here's another set of partners. And their likability. It's critical that you have mixed ability in table groups, but when you release them to partners, their likability, so they truly are having to do the work. They're not relying on their partner to do all the work. Once you have partners, notice you will still have table groups. So I may have my high kids now who are working in partners, and then I may have my slower progressing children and my average level students working in the table group. So I'm still giving them more support. Ultimately, my highs, they start moving towards independently writing their work on their own. And then my mediums and lows start working in partners. And as the year goes on, they also will go into that independent writing. At the independent writing level, notice I have something called Writer's Workshop. Once my students have the skills and understand how to write a specific genre, then I can go more into the Writer's Workshop mode where I can begin a writing block with a teacher mini lesson, showing them at a more detailed level different activities that will improve their writing that they can apply to what they already know. Instead of trying to teach children little mini lessons and they don't even understand how to plan their writing. So through this process, you're going to see I have whole group lessons, slowly releasing to table groups and partner lessons, and finally going to independent writing. And in the whole group, table, and partner writing, the focus is for them to learn how to organize, how to plan their papers for specific genres. And when they've mastered that, then they can go to that independent writing and they can start writing their own. And I can now give them mini lessons to improve their writing at a more detailed level. This is our writing block. And finally below are spelling, grammar, and teacher write. Basically what this is, for spelling and grammar, I have isolated lessons at the end of this book, my revising and editing chapter, that will connect to students actually fixing their writing on their own. Nothing is more frustrating than for a teacher to have to take home all their students' work, correct it, and then the students don't even learn from that feedback. And the teacher is always fixing the work. We need to figure out how to have students spelling and also how to fix their grammar, their mechanics, how to fix their writing on their own. So you will see through these isolated lessons that I will teach students not only these skills, but how it fixes and improves their writing so they can independently revise and edit on their own. When we have these isolated skills, we will then have activities that we need to use to connect it to actually fixing writing. So not only are they going to learn the skill, but then they will connect it to fixing their own writing. Jump to the last box over here, and this is our student practice. As I mentioned in the first box, where we will introduce in isolation spelling and grammar skills and how we connect it to writing, this is exactly where we're going to do that. We can apply what we've learned from these skills to a movie script, as well as lecture notes and content diagrams, or any activity that you are doing with students' whole group. Why can we connect to this? Because these activities end up becoming similar writing. Instead of teaching an isolated grammar skill and hoping students apply it to their writing, I will have students pull out a movie script, their lecture notes, content diagrams, and whole group, we will apply this lesson, this isolated lesson, this skill to their writing to revise or edit it. It's absolutely essential that you do this whole group. You can't teach an isolated grammar skill and then meet one-on-one with students with their own individual writing to try to apply that skill. Really what we need to do is teach in isolation the grammar skill, then use a common piece of writing to apply it whole group with your students, and finally they will use that with their own writing. It's too big of a jump to say, here's your skill in isolation, now use it in your writing. So this activity here, where we have students connected to writing, is a whole group activity to practice using the isolated skill to revise and edit. In the middle, you'll notice, is my teacher write. My teacher write does not have to connect after my spelling and grammar time, but it is nice to have it there. And what this is basically when I, for 10 minutes a day, model to students how to plan and write different genres that we are focusing on, the different genres of writing. But also in my teacher write, I'm going to model that grammar and spelling skill that we've been learning, and I'm going to use that after I write to revise and edit my paper. So not only will we practice with a whole group common piece of writing to apply that grammar and mechanics skill, but for 10 minutes a day, I will be planning. So this means that it may take an entire week with these 10-minute blocks to plan and write a particular genre, but also I can model how to revise and edit my paper as well. So this 10-minute block is something that connects day after day after day, and it could take an entire week, maybe even longer, so that I can go through the entire process of planning my paper, writing it out, and revising and editing. What do I do in revising and editing? I am only showing students what we learned in isolation to connect to my own writing. So I'm modeling that. And then finally, we'll do a whole group activity where after they've learned isolation, seen me model, then they will apply it to a whole group piece of common writing. And then finally, I expect them to use that skill to revise and edit their own paper. On these 2 pages, I've identified your different core areas in which you can integrate writing throughout your day and year. Integrating writing in these core areas means that your students will be not only writing all 3 genres, narrative, informative, explanatory, as well as opinion writing, but they will also do it in a meaningful context, which is critical for their advancement in writing. Our next chapter, we will address what do these writing lessons look like? What is the writing process?